This conference will now be recorded. This
On time.
conference will now be recorded.
I'm Roy Vestal. This is the third of 5 meetings that we currently have scheduled related to our transportation plan update. This particular meeting is focused entirely on the pedestrian of our street network. So this is biking, crosswalks, um, walking, and disability access. So that's all that we're covering tonight. Um, and we'll jump right in. The transportation plan update that's currently underway, it consists of all of these items, an analysis of our roadway network, regional transit system services, pedestrian facilities, bike facilities, recreation trails, and maintenance. And the 3 items that we're touching on for tonight are the pedestrian, bicycle, and recreation trails. Hey, come on in. This plan is related to many planning efforts that are underway with the city currently. The comprehensive plan is currently being updated. This is going to be a principal part of the comprehensive plan and incorporated into the comprehensive plan. Also, the Parks and Trails Master Plan is underway. Doug Cook, who's here tonight, thank you, is heading up that effort. Then also, our plan internally as a city also relates to the Upper Front Range Transportation Plan, a regional transportation plan, the Weld County Transportation Plan at the county level, also at the state level, the Colorado Department of Transportation, the US 85 planning and environmental linkages, and the access control plan, and also Highway 52 has an access control plan. And all of these are worked into and related to our efforts here. Tonight, in implementing a transportation plan, we want to be comprehensive. The transportation plan is no longer four-wheel related. It's related to everybody's access, bikes, people walking safely, crossing the street. Everything is taken into account. So pedestrian facilities, we look at the ADA requirements, safe routes to school, street crossings, and then the bicycle facilities that are provided, and then also recreation trails. So pedestrian facilities, primary element within the transportation plan. It includes providing both the dedicated pedestrian facilities as well as joint use facilities, which would consist of the sidewalks adjacent to the streets right away. The highlighted part is one thing that's on the website to vote on, please. Whether you consider this an important factor and consideration for the city in our transportation plan. The city intends to, this has been in the transportation plan for the last several iterations. We want to be consistent and make sure it's still important to everybody, and all these that we'll be voting on, to make sure it's still a part of what we want to do as a city. The city intends to pursue the development of an integrated sidewalk and pedestrian path network as new development occurs and as a part of redevelopment projects. Are you strongly in favor? Yeah, we can take it or leave it, or really don't want to even consider it. Those are options to vote for on that social site. When we talk about complete streets and pedestrians, the policy we want to promote to ensure that the entire right of way is routinely used, planned, designed, constructed, and operated in a safe access for all users. That includes the bikes, the pedestrians, the kids going to school. Some examples of a street diet on the right, the 2 pages or the 2 pictures on the right are a street diet effort where you can see the upper roadway was 4 lanes and just 4 lanes and dedicated strictly to the travel for the cars. This city modified with a street diet, brought it down to 2 travel lanes, 1 turn lane in the middle which makes your left turn lanes safer when you get out of the flow of traffic. Also, it gave bike lanes on the outside, so there's bike lanes. And then it's always important to, sorry, it usually doesn't ring. Um, Important to have pedestrian offset from the travel way. It's the farther away they are from the travel, the safer it is for the pedestrian. So you can see the sidewalks. They did maintain sidewalks offset and incorporated into this whole section. The left picture is what we call a complete street, looking at all means of travel. We've got your vehicle travel. You've got a landscape amenity that gives separation from the pedestrians, and then access to the businesses that are there. So with pedestrian access, sidewalk maintenance is our primary focus in public works to keep up with what we have, keep it safe, no tripping hazards, keeping it ADA. The design standards have changed through the years. You can walk around town and you can tell about the time frame when a neighborhood was developed by the width of the sidewalk. You'll see, for instance, like the trees, there's like a 2-foot sidewalk with rollover curb. Older parts of town, those sidewalks actually happened later than when it was developed, so they tend to be a little wider in some places. About 3 is what we see typical in the early installations. And then our current standards are a 5-foot walk, because that's the comfort level of 2 people either side by side or passing without having to step off the curb. It's also a comfortable platform for wheelchair access. The 2-foot, there's no way you're getting a wheelchair on there. 3-foot, marginally, but you're usually falling off. So we have right-of-way restrictions when we try to bring up to date to the standards for the 5-foot width. We have some restrictions, some right-of-ways, and the right-of-way is what city maintains or is strictly for the use of the public to pass. So some places, some neighborhoods, some of the right-of-way comes up into what you think is your yard, but it's really city property, but you still maintain it. So some places we have extra wide right-of-way. In those cases, it's easy to expand the sidewalk to get the 5-foot walk. And then ADA standards with ramps, a lot of our ramps are inadequate. And a lot of the standards also change with the ADA ramp, so you can tell when the ramps were put in, what standards were in place at the time. Many of the older standards don't meet standards today. So a lot of those require updates as we go. And then crosswalks. We're looking at where we find the need for a controlled crosswalk, or and we've got some standards set for when we need to implement and have to implement those improvements. Oops, wrong way. The American Disability Act, the law requires that whenever we do a street project, roads, highways, if they're altered, resurfacing, reconstruction, widening, they have to include accessible ramps. All our projects incorporate the corner ramps with current standards, and also sidewalk ramping at driveways, so that you're not exceeding the 2% slope, cross slope that you're required, and the ramp down is never more than 12, less than 12 to 1. And that keeps everything accessible. Crosswalks. Here's a touchy situation with me. When we want to implement a controlled crosswalk or a semi-controlled crosswalk, there's a big education effort, because in accordance with Colorado Revised Statute, a driver must stop and yield the right-of-way to the pedestrian when they are in the marked or an unmarked crosswalk. What scares me is, if you're familiar with driving around Fort Collins, Boulder, any college town, I think that it gets this way, they are entitled, or they feel entitled, that when they want to cross, they just step off the curb. And I have to always remind everybody, physics rules. The car is much bigger than you are. You're not going to win that battle. The pedestrian by law cannot suddenly enter traffic if a vehicle is too close to stop in time. and they can't leave the curb and walk into traffic. Those two requirements need to be minded and kind of educated when a crosswalk is implemented. There are several types of crosswalks. Some are just marked, and those have its challenges. Some, when traffic calls for it, we can do a warning light signal, but the warning light signal crosswalk is not right of way. You still have to wait for the traffic to yield. Typical drivers will yield when they see the flashing yellow, and they understand that. A step further is a dedicated crosswalk. We're starting to see a lot of them in Denver, where you push the button, it'll start flashing a yellow warning to the drivers. They don't have to stop yet, but then it starts flashing red. When it starts flashing red, it's like a regular traffic signal, and you have to stop. And then it goes solid. And then after pedestrians cross, it'll start flashing red still. If the way is clear, drivers can go again and not wait for it to go away. So those are a little bit more proactive and less scary for me, but very expensive. So, but it's with a lot of traffic where they're really needed. And of course, then we also have like our traffic signal here on McKinley with a dedicated pedestrian light, giving the right of way to avoid the turning interference. So those are the kind of different steps up for a crosswalk. And if I can keep remembering which way to go. So in accordance with the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, crosswalks should be marked at all intersections on established routes to school where there is substantial conflict between the motorist, bicyclist, and pedestrian movements, where students are encouraged to cross between intersections or where students would not otherwise recognize a proper place. Scroll down to advance, just so you know. Criteria. You don't want to necessarily mark all intersections with a crosswalk. There does exist at every intersection a crosswalk, whether it's marked or not. But measures to, and there are still standards in highway design that you don't want to impede or impact the traffic a whole lot. You know, there are needs and times when you want to do that. But for our standards, we're looking at adopting Longmont standards, actually, where I stole this from. The pedestrian volume would be 20 pedestrians per hour on an average day. And that's and a peak time. And then also with 15 or more elderly children or disabled, that you'd want a crosswalk for. And then looking at the overall picture during a 4-hour period, if you had 60 or more pedestrians crossing at an intersection, you definitely want a crosswalk established. Also, we're looking at traffic conditions. Obviously, say at Park and 3rd Street, there's not that much traffic through there. So every crosswalk doesn't need to be marked. So when the average daily traffic is at least 1,500 vehicles, and that's during the day, the speed limit is greater than 40. And then with 4 lanes or more, if you have an annual average daily traffic of 12,000, you definitely want a controlled type crosswalk situation. Core elements of a safe crosswalk: high visibility, bright markings, visible markings, highly visible, optimal lighting, critical for at night. The darker intersections are more dangerous, obviously. You're not seen. Also, reducing the crossing distance. It makes for a great crosswalk. Instead of crossing 40 feet of pavement, little bump outs are created and you're only crossing 22, 23 feet of pavement. Keeps your exposure, reduces your exposure. Advanced warning and signage. So ahead of the time, it says, crosswalk ahead. Um, Traffic calming measures also help. Some of those measures we can allow, some cause other problems, but that's for another uh, meeting that we have scheduled. um, and then also smart signalization, those signals that do the flashing or are coordinated with the traffic signal. And now let's see. Oh, Safe Routes to School is a national movement to encourage kids to bike, walk to school. Along with that, there's some best practices for engineering to support that effort. Most of it is an encouragement program where you get groups of kids to hike or walk together into school, things like that. But best practices for engineering support, they prefer sidewalks a minimum 8 feet wide. Shared path would be a minimum 11 feet wide. A shared path would be like bikes and pedestrians walking. And then high visible crosswalks. And now I'd like to introduce Rosa Elena Cardenas, a student at MSU. She did a study on us last summer.
Yeah,
Was it?
it's gone by, yeah, soon.
Been that long? Taking a look at the Highway 52 at our crossing and crosswalks that we have. I'd like to invite you up.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm super excited to be able to share with you guys my results. So I did this crosswalk kind of focusing in particular to how pedestrians were interacting with vehicles on Highway 52. So I looked at Grand Avenue, Park Avenue, Fulton Avenue, and Harrison Avenue. So all of these do not have a traffic signal for pedestrian to be able to push. They're kind of relying a lot on drivers to be complying and yielding for pedestrians when they're at the crosswalk. So I did this in two types of methods. The first method was a staged pedestrian myself, where I attempted to cross at these intersections 2 times a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. So I started in July and went through until October. So it ended up being a total of 52 crossings at each intersection, crossing from the around 15-minute mark. Halfway through, I would attempt to cross the intersection at the 6-minute mark, wait a little bit, and then attempt to cross the intersection the opposite direction. So it ended up being a total of 52 crossings at each intersection, 26 for walking from south to north, and then another 26 from north to south. So the whole point was kind of to really pay attention to how pedestrians were interacting with vehicles and how vehicles were responding to pedestrians. So during that time, I took note of everything, like how many pedestrians were crossing at this intersection in those 15 minutes, along with pedestrian, like how I was feeling while interacting, but also how were drivers yielding? Were they stopping? Were they not stopping? Were pedestrians kind of going straight through? That type of interaction. So my second type of method was a 1-hour observation session. So I recorded for an hour, same thing, recorded vehicle interactions, how the pedestrian was crossing, and how many pedestrians were crossing during that hour. I knew it was really important for me to incorporate community members in this. So having a survey was really important to me. So when I was doing the internship with the Chief Carness, he reached out to the Fort Lupton advertising department, and they were able to post the survey for community members to kind of tell me how they were feeling about these intersections. I didn't put all the questions on there. It was a total of 10 questions, but these were the ones that were the most important that I feel like today would be great to kind of display this information. So the first one's talking about how did they feel that drivers frequently failed to stop for pedestrians. So as you can see, we had a total of 60% saying that they strongly agreed, and then 29% said that they agreed that they weren't stopping for pedestrians. Out of those 52 respondents, we had a total of 52 saying that they have actually experienced a near miss incident before. For the last one, it's how did they feel crossing at these intersections without a traffic light? So we have a total of 35% saying that they felt unsafe and 33% saying that they felt unsafe. The other one's very unsafe, sorry. So this is a crash data map that I created. I grabbed the crash data from 2021 to 2024. And as you can see, we have Grand Avenue, Fulton, they're all here. These individual dots is just one individual accident with the vehicle to vehicle. And the most dense areas were the ones with the yellow. The more yellow, that means that the more vehicle to vehicle accidents that there was. So as you can see, if a pedestrian would want to be crossing over to a traffic light, they would be walking over to those areas where there is a higher vehicle to vehicle accident rate. So they would be having to walk over there, and that can potentially be dangerous, but at the same time, it kind of just depends as well. So these are the results for a 15-minute staged pedestrian myself crossing at this intersection. So I divided it into when crossing from north to south and then from south to north. Then I looked at no yield. So the no yield means that if I'm on the crosswalk and even if just one vehicle passed in front of me while I was there, it is considered a no yield. So if no one stopped for me, it's a no yield. For a gap, that means that I had the opportunity as soon as I got into the crosswalk, there was no vehicles for me to pass by, so I was able to cross safely, either running across or just walking across. The yield means that a vehicle stopped or two vehicles stopped for me. If one vehicle stopped for me, the other side of the intersection had a big enough gap for me to walk across. So right here, this is actually me in the flannel. This black Ford actually stopped for me correctly. They stopped on the opposite side of the crosswalk. They had a red light. Once that light turned green, they actually went ahead and they drove, but I got stuck in the middle of the road. I had a total of 5 vehicles pass in front of me before I had to make the initiative to cross. I ran across, as a matter of fact. So that happened a lot at this intersection. So this is Park Avenue. So for Grand Avenue, it had a very similar response. We had a 73% doing a no yield for pedestrian, 4% doing a gap, and then a 23% actually yield for the pedestrian. For Fulton Avenue, the grand total was 54% doing a no yield, 4% of me, I crossed during a gap, and then 42% actually yields for me when I was trying to cross. For Park Avenue, the grand total was a 50% doing a no yield, 12% doing a gap, and 30% a driver yield for me. For Harrison Avenue, we have 63% doing a no yield for pedestrian, 12% did a gap, and 25% yield for the pedestrian. So as you can see, the ones with the highest no yields criteria was when I was crossing from Park Avenue from south to north, it was a 64% doing a no yield. And then for Harrison Avenue, when I was crossing from the north to the south part of the crosswalk, I had a 73% doing a no yield. So during my 2 1-hour observations, so that is when I'm recording for an hour, I didn't physically record, but I'm taking notes of everything, how many pedestrians passed by, same thing, did they yield, did they gap, or did not yield. So for Grand Avenue, we had a total of 25%, 20 pedestrians crossing at this intersection in 1 hour. 96% of those were students. So it's actually during their lunch period, and we have 4% doing 4% of them were adults. For the overall driver compliance, we're looking at a 62% of them did a no yield, 15% of the pedestrians took a gap, and 23% actually yield for the pedestrian. For Fulton Avenue, the afternoon actually had the highest pedestrian volume, which is of 12 pedestrians. 58% of them were students, 25% of them were adults, and 17% of them were elderly. It was for the afternoon, it was a 67% did a no yield, 11% did a gap, and 22% yield for the pedestrian. For Park Avenue, the afternoon had the highest volume of pedestrians. It was 14, and 100% of those were students. We have a 43% did not yield for those students. 14% of those students took a gap during that intersection, and 43% of them did a yield. For Harrison Avenue, it had the lowest pedestrian volume compared to the other ones, but the afternoon had the highest with 5 of them, 80% of them were students, 20% of them were adults. and 75% did not yield for pedestrians. 25 actually did yield for the pedestrians. So as you can see, even though Harrison Avenue had the lowest volume of pedestrians, they were mostly elderly and disabled pedestrians crossing at this intersection, and 100% of them did not yield for them, which is concerning, knowing that that intersection is very long. They are relying a lot on drivers yielding, and they're not. When I was doing my internship and doing my analysis, I focused on the Colorado Department of Transportation Pedestrian Crossing Installation Guide. So this is what engineers use to kind of figure out what kind of treatment they want to implement at these intersections. So they categorize them in two ways, an uncontrolled and a controlled. So a controlled example would be Fulton Avenue. So Fulton Avenue is a school crossing. It has one of these signs with an arrow pointing down towards the crosswalk. So that's considered a controlled. For the uncontrolled, it'd be Grand Avenue Park and Harrison Avenue. So I'm going to use Grand Avenue as an example today, just so you guys can get an idea of what kind of an engineer would kind of look at for this. So for an uncontrolled, they go off of average daily traffic. It says that it has to be greater than 1,500 vehicles per day. For Grand Avenue, we're actually at 16,000 vehicles per day. So that would be a yes. We would move down to the next one. It says, is it a multi-use path? So yes, it is. It actually goes towards Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King, the schools, any of those restaurants. So it is a multi-use path. Then the next question is the nearest marked or protected crosswalk less than 300 feet away? And there's an asterisk there. That asterisk actually mentions that in an urban condition, it can be reduced to 200 feet. But that's actually, it kind of depends on the engineer and what they believe is an urban condition and if they want to consider it 200 feet. However, in this condition, I'm going to say yes, it is at 200 feet. So we would move on to the next one. It says, is there an adequate stopping sight distance? I believe that it is, but I'm not an engineer. I'm an environmental scientist. But based on what I've seen and myself driving on this road, I definitely believe that there is a distance to be able to improve that. Even if you would say no, it says, is it possible to be able to improve it? And I say yes. So then it moves on to table one. So table one categorizes it in three ways. The first one is vehicles per day. So for for Park Avenue, we're at 16,000. So we would look at that last column over there, and then the speed limit being 30 miles per hour. And this is a 3 lanes without a raised median, and it says treatment C. So treatment C says to install a marked crosswalk with enhanced improvements. That way people can see that there's a pedestrian crossing up ahead, but also to reduce the exposure rate of a pedestrian crossing at this intersection. And those examples would be like adding a head sign or a 20 feet warning sign. That way drivers can see that there is a crosswalk ahead and to be paying attention to that. So this is a map that I created kind of just to show what pedestrians have to walk if they want to go over to a protected crosswalk. So I manually went out there and I recorded how long the distance is. I did it 3 times, took the average, and this is what that average is. As you can see, Grand Avenue, one of the sides is actually less than 200, but everything else is greater than those 200 feet. And again, if they wanted to go over to those traffic lights, that means that they would have to go over to the area where there is that high volume of vehicle-to-vehicle accidents. So why is this so important? So the longer a pedestrian waits at these intersections, the higher of a chance that they'll be taking a risky cross. So it being an uncontrolled crosswalk and knowing that, I mean, we all know that the population is growing here in town. The volume of vehicles that are coming in is actually increasing. So if the volume is increasing, that means that those gaps of where people are going to be able to cross are going to be shorter. So they are actually exposing themselves to taking those risky crosses. So from those 7 years, from 2018 to 2024, depending on which intersection we're looking at, it was a 23% to a 38% increase. And we already know that 68% community members have reported feeling unsafe crossing at these intersections. So it's really important for us to kind of figure out, okay, what's the next move? But again, how Roy said, we don't want to encourage people to think that, well, I have the immediate right of way. So being able to figure out what's the best way to implement these kind of safeties is really important, especially knowing that it's a state highway. So if people are actually feeling unsafe and uncomfortable at these intersections, the less likely that they'll be wanting to go out on walks, wanting to go like on a bike ride, walking to school, walking to the rec center. We have a really small surrounding area where people are actually able to walk. So being able to have a safe environment and a healthy environment is really important. So this is an overall safety and health and accessibility risk. So I look at this kind of as a public health issue, but I know that it's possible for us to kind of see the importance of why I did the study as someone who grew up in this town and I walk these intersections myself. It has changed a lot. Even when I was doing the study, I had an individual say on his bike, like, it's not how it used to be. And I'm literally recording at the same time, and I'm like, yep, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out how all of this is changing, and I'm really excited to see what we can kind of do as a community. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you.
So interestingly enough, the Highway 52 Planning and Environmental Linkages Study includes a lot of these suggestions that she brought to light. Interestingly enough, at Grand, CDOT, and we'll probably be having conversations of this in the future, is proposing closing that Grand intersection off to left-hand turns in both directions. That would be a safer scenario, definitely. They're right in that aspect. There's some other issues of detouring around and getting around and how that works, but it's a conversation we'll be having. They're also looking, Bubble 5 is the Fulton intersection. This is kind of hot off the press, did finally get approval from CDOT that, we could put a traffic signal there. They said it will be needed in the near future. So they haven't committed to it yet, but they're like, yeah, it is potential. So that's coming down the line a little ways. And then some other controlled cross sections, crosswalks and stuff through there. Interestingly enough, Highway 52 ultimate growth cross section is going to be 4 lanes with a median turn lane. So that's a little farther down the future. A little bit more traffic to build before that's required, but that is a major undertaking. The bicycle facilities. This is another item to vote on, please. Similar to our pedestrian element, we want the bicycle element intended to become an integral component of new development projects and redevelopment. Both the bicycle and pedestrian elements of the transportation system plan will have to be coordinated with the roadway element to ensure safe crossings. So is the bicycle element important still? Do we leave it in the transportation plan and give it a sense of urgency? So definitely please vote on that. When we're talking bicycle facilities, that's kind of several options available. And depending upon the traffic that we're talking to on the road, of which measure is more important. Obviously, the safest way to make the bicyclist safer is to give separation from the traffic, separation from the roadway a little bit even. That's why the wider sidewalks are important in our current standards for the roadway section. And as far as selecting which method is to be used, it's based on the volume of traffic and the speed of the traffic that's involved that the bike is riding along with. So up to about 3,000 average daily traffic with less than 25 miles per hour is considered reasonably safe, and it can be a shared bicycle lane, which is, and as we go left to right, it gets increasingly up into this graph. But you know, as you start getting, you want a buffer lane. This is a dedicated lane. This is the buffer lane. We got a little bit of separation, and this is a grade separated lane, which is more safe for the bicyclists because it keeps them confined. A little bit more protection with a curb, and then obviously out by themselves on a trail is the safest for a bicyclist. This is a look at what we've mapped out of where we've gotten to currently with development and some plans going forward of where some bicycle lanes and the trails will be going. This is going to be refined with Doug's effort and worked into the overall plan. But as we've been going, like with the development that's still in the works here with the this property off of 29.5 includes a trail along the High Line, or the, sorry, I always want to call it the High Line Canal, the Fulton Ditch. And then ultimately picking up, we got it built in Cottonwood. You'll see it there. It'll eventually extend on up where the blue dash line is going, hopefully making it connect all the way north eventually in some fashion. Same way with going south. We're looking at a potential long-range regional trail along the Platte. We'll be working with Brighton for a connection there and north to Platteville. Be a very exciting facility for us to have. And then as far as on the road, we're looking at the widths and dedicated, whether we dedicate bike lanes and things like that. Our initial attempt at including a bike lane, if anybody remembers, about 3 years ago, when we did some work on the bump outs on Denver, we included Fourth as being a throughway for the bike path because it makes sense. It's got a crossing with the railroad tracks. It goes all the way up into Coyote Creek, all the way over to Grand. Fourth is a major kind of corridor for potential pedestrians. So we looked at several options on it and settled in on this option to give it a two-way dedicated bike path. It didn't go over so well, so that's why you don't see the curb there anymore. Haven't given up the fight on that, but eventually it's got a potential, and we'll see how that works out. That's why this meeting is so important, and for you to vote on the bicycle element, because we went along with the design, and it was public meetings with the design as we were going and selecting, and that was our understanding of the direction the city wanted to go. You should have seen the outcry on Facebook and neighborhood. So it went away. But recreation trails. This is our old proposed trail map. You can see a lot of the parts that we just looked at, what we've mapped of trying to make connections and making everything very good. This is our off-road trail proposed cross section of what we're going for a hard paved surface. And Doug, he's had a lot of meetings already and getting input, and they're putting things together to revise this plan, of which we're going to incorporate into our transportation plan to make sure we get the connections and the bike trails all programmed for funding and projects. And then the comprehensive plan, we're actually going to be pulling stuff from the comprehensive plan for the last stages of the transportation plan to model and map out how the traffic's going to grow. As the city grows, we want to make sure we're ahead of the game and looking for when we're going to need to widen the road, when we're going to need to improve a section. All that gets worked out into their comprehensive plan, and we pull that information and data into ours and figuring. And then all this gets boiled into a sidewalk improvements plan where we're incorporating all these safe routes, the ADA, street crossings, traffic calming, the Parks and Trails master plan. In the end, and a reason to follow this particular page in social is we'll eventually have a list of projects, and we'll want voting to prioritize what's more important to everybody in town, not what seems most important to whoever is sitting up on the dais, but what's important to everybody, their constituents. So the voting is real. It is important and it is incorporated. So as we complete this map with projects and listing out the different projects, and we'll have cost estimates on them, and we can prioritize them. And obviously, there's always finances involved. This is what we're looking at for a budget. This is a lot of information in one small slide. We covered it all in the first section, or the first meeting we had, which you can go replay. I'm a star. It's recorded and on that social website on the page under the kickoff meeting to explain all our sources, the street sales tax, how much we have, what we project we can spend, how much we have to keep in reserve, and a little bit of what everything costs. Can't do everything we want to do all at once, but we can plan ahead and make it happen over a period of time. And then the overall improvements plan. With the other item, and the December meeting we had went over maintenance issues and how we tackle and budget and plan for the maintenance issues. Everything from the unpaved streets, improvements, planning with sidewalks and just general maintenance, and what that costs is all included in that. But the improvement plan gets all put together. We project out 6 years for every budget cycle to where we know where we're going for 6 years. Every project gets a prioritization, so we're not just willy-nilly picking this one or that one. Based on health, safety, welfare is a top issue. Obviously, if there's something unsafe, we got to get it fixed soon. The level of service that we're currently experiencing with that particular facility, whether it's being used well or the comfort level, what have you, what the disruption of the service would be if we didn't do it, the improvement. Basically, how many people are going to be impacted? If there's regulatory compliance issue, cost implications, public support, here's your vote. You get a piece of the pie for selecting the priorities. And then how many problems are we addressing with the project that we're going to do? If we can do a project where we're fixing a water line or a sewer line, at the same time we're fixing the road, I've got and drainage there, I got 3 problems solved in one project. And as I said, I want your input. I really, really do. That's the same QR code as at the front. If you haven't gone on and registered, please do. Monitor that website, follow the transportation plan, push the follow button. You'll get email updates as we get more and more information in there. There are going to be input maps. There's currently one for this session where you can, and as soon as we're done here, I'll pull it up on the screen so you can see. I'm going to ask you for some input tonight. Where you can put where you want to bike to, where you want to walk to, where we have a problem, where we need a crossing, things like that. You'll see about 10 of them on there already. Some of my planning cohorts got into it early and started plugging in things they knew about. There'll be the polls, voting on different issues, ranking the projects. There's recorded meetings up there and a schedule of the next meetings. Please share it. Spread it far and wide and recruit. Any questions? There's the 3 now that will be recorded that will be on that site. Upcoming May 20th is traffic control. Basically, I'm asking a question: how do we slow down? We'll be looking at stop signs, traffic lights, traffic calming measures that we could incorporate. There's pros and cons about all of them, but a lot of them have been found to be effective for slowing people down. July 22nd, we're looking at railroads and highways. So everything to do with the Union Pacific Railroad, all our challenges we face with them, and also our cohorts at CDOT, and everything that we have to deal with Highway 52. Those 2 entities play a major impact on our transportation here locally. CDOT, because we got 2 highways, we're cornered in, boxed in, 52 and 85. And then bisecting the city is Union Pacific Railroad. It's just tough to learn to live with it and try and get along with them. So, any questions? No, I can pull up the website real quick, and assuming I can see where my mouse goes. There we go. Not at my desk. And there you go. Oh, it's not going to remember me. It'll remember me from my other computer, so I won't log in. But I'll give you an idea. You can do all this anonymously. But like I say, if you're registered, we can get some analytics about how many in the city have and where are we getting the contributions from. This is all really important, and we really want to know. But it's the transportation plan. And if you would, push that follow button, get more updates, scroll down. Here's where the first video is in this tab, and then the second video with maintenance. So if you want more information on that and how we came up with some of the things, and this is our current one. So all you got to do is just click a button on each of the 3 poles with each of the elements, the pedestrian element, the bicycles, and what was it? Pedestrian, bicycles, and trails. If we want to keep that as a part of our transportation plan, putting emphasis on it, or do we want to drop it and not spend the money on it? So that's what we want to know. This map, fairly user-friendly. If you want to see what somebody else has done, you just click on, like, these bubbles, pull a bunch of them that are close together in together. So it'll zoom in to where it clears them, but you can click on that. This particular guy said he'd like to walk, ride, bike from College Avenue to the Safeway along the south side of Highway 52. That's going to be in our trail plan, assuming everybody agrees. So we want a trail plan to make sure we get that corridor connected from College to Apple and to the Safeway, and have a 10-foot wide trail along outside in the right of way, but outside of the roadway pavement. I mean, everybody knows 52 is dangerous as all get out. And that's a safer way to go. But you can place a button anywhere you want, and tell me what you think. Where's my button selector? That's a share. Sorry, I'm not used to looking at it upside down. There we go. You can pick a marker, just a general marker, like this guy here, and he told me that it's too fast over at 31. Like that. Pick where you want to start walking, and then put a pin down where you want to stop walking, and we'll figure out the best way to get there, trail wise, and what we want to put in for improvements. Please mark up. Take a look at what everybody else is doing. If somebody's hit something that you want, put another one down. The more we have in that dense area, that's a pocket area that we're like, okay, we got to focus in this area. So please add. And with that, that's about all I got. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Well, that's it then.